am doing wonderful. I am doing wonderful. How are you?
Good, good. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Jodi Inspires show.
Well, I want to thank you for having me. You are just a great activist and an advocate for people, and you do a lot of good for our community. And I just am more than thrilled and honored to be on your show. And I know when I first got started on the bench, you had asked me, could I do an interview? And I said yes, but COVID and everything else happened. So we finally got it done. But thank you, Jodi, for your tremendous support in this community and just being a voice for the people. I saw you last night on the news, and I was really proud of you. So
Yeah,
just continue to push on, my sister.
thank you. And you too. So, please introduce yourself to everyone. Everyone already knows who you are, but introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you and what inspired you to become a judge.
Okay, well, for all of you who don't know me, my name is Judge Monica Hawkins, and I have been a judge on the domestic relations and juvenile court for it's going on my third year, Jodi. Can you believe it?
Whoa!
Time
It's been
flies.
3 years.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Wow, ain't that the truth?
Yes, so I am one of two new judges. Judge Lachelle Stroud is the second when it was elected. That started the bench. They expanded the bench from five judges to seven because
Okay.
of the administration and the uptick of cases that we're now, and our population has grown a lot. So I've been on the bench. I was a newly created seat, so no other judge replaced them. I started my own bench, and I pretty much started from scratch. I did inherit some cases from other judges, but pretty much that job I started from scratch, and me and my team have kind of developed our own method and courtroom policy and procedure and how we handle people, and we're up and running. So, just to tell you a little bit about myself, I am a resident of Franklin County. I've been
Okay.
here lifelong. I was born to my mother, Father Thomas and Carol Hawkins. They got married early. They got divorced early. So it was me and my two brothers. It was raised by my mom on the south side of Columbus, Ohio. My dad still stayed very active in our lives. I went to Smith Road Elementary School. So for all my friends out there, Smith Road for life. We have,
Okay.
yeah, a life
Southside.
south side. We have a lifelong friendship, and my mom still lives over there. A lot of the parents of my friends still live out there, and we still go back for reunions. So I am Smith Road. I went to Southmore Junior High School because we had junior high school back then. It was seventh, eighth, and ninth. Again, South Side, and then they started busing, and then I went to Independence High School. So from there, I was blessed to meet people from different walks of life. I gained a lot of friendship and experiences out there. So after I graduated from Independence in 1983, I
I
decided
was
to.
two.
You were too. Myself.
Go ahead.
I went to Ohio State University. It's now I don't know when the came on,
Yes.
but we used to just say I go to Ohio State. So
Yeah.
I went to Ohio State University where I studied criminal justice and criminology. I've always had a passion for some reason, and I could see all the threads coming together for justice and working in the criminal justice arena. So I got my degree from the Ohio State University. I also had a wonderful son, Deontay
Yeah.
Johnson Jr.,
Mm-hmm.
born while I was a student.
Mm.
After I graduated from college, I started working for Franklin County Children's Services.
Okay.
Never heard about him. All I remember seeing when I was growing up was his sad face. They remember the little brown face with the boy with the two eyes and no mouth. And I used to always wonder what that was. So when I started working for him, I found that there was a whole world out there of children who were abused, neglect, dependent, even if it's just benign neglect and dealing with a gambit of problems involving poverty, lack of education, lack of resources, racism, drug addiction. That was when the proliferation of crack addiction had come into our society. So I worked with that families in harm's way and families in crisis for a little over 13 years. During that time, God renewed my path to go to law school. So I went to law school while I was working there, and then I became an attorney. And I stayed at Children's Services for approximately 12 years as their staff attorney. And there
Wow.
with abuse, neglect, dependent children, some delinquency children, some unruly issues. And I did a lot of the termination of parental right cases where you terminate parental rights, and you free children up for adoption. So I pretty much covered the whole gambit. And at one point in time, I felt like I did everything I needed to do with children's services. So I started working for the public defender office, the federal department, and I dealt with and worked in their capital habeas unit with is death row, and I was an investigator there. So I kind of saw that pathway from abuse, neglect, dependency in the juvenile court system to the adult court system.
All the way up to the adults.
Yeah, okay. Because a lot of those kids, when I met with them and interviewed them, they had all suffered the same ailments. Most of them were raised in the system. Most of them had contact and connections with the court system really early. A lot of them were illiterate because they didn't finish school. Most of them didn't even complete ninth grade. A lot of them dealt with the benign neglect because they had parents in crisis and parents who suffered mental health issues, alcohol and drug addictions, poverty, sickness, and then not getting the proper education and the village raising the kids. So that kind of put me on the path of running for judge, because I kind of saw from the cradle to the grave how the court system is like the common denominator to help thwart off some of that and help redirect and navigate some of our kids and our youth so they can help go on a positive path and not go down that path of destruction. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So like, wow, like, so you've worked with the kids all the way up to, and then you've also worked with the adults. Like how much interactions did you have like with the families? Like how, like, were you able to, like, reach the families, like, with, as far as like with the kids and things like that? I know that a lot of people say everything, it starts at home. So even if we kind of like, my words are like real bad today, even if we try to change the young person before it's too late, but they have to go back to that same environment, that same toxic environment. Like, how do we need to reach the parents?
Oh, definitely. So when I worked as a caseworker, it was a family approach, and you work with the whole family, and you try to provide services, case management services to the family, to access them to resources to help minimize their problems and alleviate problems. And you work with, getting them in drug and alcohol treatment, getting them in mental health counseling, psychological evaluations, parenting classes, the whole gamut. You're working with the whole family. Now, when I worked as an investigator, unfortunately, I just worked with that one person that was on death row, and we were trying to overturn the death row and get them mandatory life. And the sad thing about it is, when I met a lot of those kids who were on death row, I could still see the child in them. It's like they hadn't grown, and whatever age they committed that offense, they had them tried as adult. They were still that age.
They're still that age.
Yeah, and the problem was, most of them, they're not the same person. Most of them had remorse. Most of them were very contrite. It was just a barrage of things happening, like a perfect storm that led up to that incident. And just to say, and I'm speaking beforehand, it takes a village to raise a child. That's an old African proverb, and it starts at home. And I'm not judging anybody. I'm just speaking for myself. As a mom, I was head of the household. I monitored everything my son did. I monitored what he watched. I gave him structure. I made sure he was going to school. He was getting his education. I had him involved in activities. I monitored who he hung out with. He knew my house was my house. One, I didn't make him the man of the house. I think a lot of times people make that mistake. They're not the man of the house, they're children. And he knew that there were no closed doors policies, and that it was my house, and that meant I can go through anything at any time. I was able to check the cookies on the computer and monitor everything that he did. And I watched who he hung out with. If I didn't discern that it was a good friendship, I cut it off. I was a teen mom. I picked up kids, dropped them off. He didn't just get to hang out places. He didn't just get to spend a night anywhere. And I just had tight reins on him. And I know he used to get so mad at me all the time because I work for children's services and say, Mom, I'm not a children's services kid. He didn't understand that God put parents in children's lives to raise them in the fear and the admonition of the Lord and give them the tools necessary to be successful adults. But unfortunately, we have a transgenerational problem because people have over time, due to neglect, abuse, um, substance abuse issues, criminal behavior, our children, I think, now are suffering the fruits of our actions. And now children don't have the stability, the discipline, the training, the protection, tools in place to be successful adults. And then also, they have access to adult things that they shouldn't have access to, but their mind is not capable of understanding and grasping the severity of what they're doing. That's exactly why we have a juvenile court system, because we have determined through research, through data, and through statistics that juveniles do not function like adults. They don't have the human capability. They don't have the psychological aptitude. They don't have the resources to cognitively understand the seriousness of the consequences. A lot of times kids think they're invincible. They don't understand the finality and the eternity of death, and they're kids. So the problem is we have a lot of kids who don't understand the seriousness of what's happening. And the juvenile court system was established first in 1899 in Chicago, Illinois, was the first enactment of a juvenile court system when they gave the courts jurisdiction over abused, neglect, dependent, and delinquent children under the age of 18. And the whole focus and goal of juvenile court system is on rehabilitation and not punishment. And stop labeling our kids as criminals and saying they're found guilty and sending them to prison and adjudicating them delinquents and trying to send a system of reform and rehabilitation to give them an opportunity to change their behavior to be productive as citizens in the United States.
So is that what like the diversion programs that you guys have at right now currently? Is that kind of what that is?
That's kind of it's because so the court, since the first one was established by 1929, I think every state in the District of Columbia had some system of a juvenile court system. And there's a lot of precedent in the Supreme Court where they have relied on research and psychologists to say that kids are different. They're made up different. So, the problem is, and I think the tension is that we're always dealing and balancing social welfare versus social control. They're kids, they need help, and we need to provide it to them. But we also want to keep the community safe. So the juvenile court system has evolved a lot, and now they're trying to work at diversion as a means and a method to get the kids who are needlessly in the system because of poverty, because of race, can get out the system and get into programming to help them be rehabilitated and stay in a community, because that does so much better for them as adults as opposed to keeping them incarcerated or in the detention center.
So can you like summarize the diversion, like what it is, because some people aren't really familiar with it.
So we have adopted the JDAI. It's the Juvenile Detention Alternative Initiative, and it's an initiative instituted by the state of Ohio. And what we try to do is our goal is to focus on rehabilitation and keeping our kids and trying to divert them out of that system. I mean, there's historical data that shows that a kid spending one night in a juvenile detention center can destroy their whole life and cause a ripple effect of problems that will impact them negatively for the rest of their lives. So as a society, we are responsible to try to keep kids as safe and as sane as possible and try to make sure they get the treatment in the direction that they can in order to be successful adults. And if they do commit some kind of crime, if it's appropriate, to give them a clean slate when they're 18. So we're trying to divert people out the system to keep them in society, because we know as a society, people do better when they're in the community and they're participating in the community and they're being disciplined and getting treatment and education in the community rather than being locked up.
So when the judges decide not to lock the young people up, where do they go to? Where do they go back home? Do they go to the Buckeye Ranch? Like, where did they go to once they're released?
And that depends. Each of us judges have our own caseload, and there's a benign test and it's neutral, and it determines whether a kid, if they meet these factors, they'll be released. There's a couple places they can be released to. They can be released to their parents or a custodian. They can be released into the custody of Children's Services, and Children's Services acts as their parents, and they can place them in various places like group homes, rehabilitation facilities, residential treatment facilities, and places like what's it called? George, I can't think of that. George Johnson. It's a facility in Illinois that's really successful. And so, or we can hold them in detention until a further hearing. So those are the different places. Now, none of them are ever able to sign themselves out because they are under 18, and some adult has to have some kind of custody of them.
Okay.
So we don't just let them, they just run around. They're supposed to go to either parent, legal custodian, or Children's Services, or some child placement agency.
Okay. So I have okay. Did you do a police ride along before? I think I seen a
Yes.
picture of you. Okay.
Yes.
I think
Yes.
that is so important for our leaders to do a police ride along, so they get to see what it is like from a police officer's standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I've learned from my police officer friends, they say that when they arrested young people, as soon as they arrest them, next thing you know, they're out before the ink is dry on a report. And that's I've gotten that for years from them. Like, it's they say how it's frustrating. And then also one situation that really stood out to me, which you don't have to talk directly about that one, but a young man that was arrested, at least he's arrested 4 times, like before February, the middle of this year, before the middle of like February. And the fifth time his crime, he hit a older grandmother trying to steal her car. Older lady, I don't know if she was a grandmother or not, but she was an older lady. He was trying to steal her car, and he assaulted her and actually hit her. It was all over the news, so I'm pretty sure you've seen it. How does cases like that happen to where is there like a glitch in the system thing that you guys are using, or how did it get out and then continue getting back in more trouble?
All right. So there's no glitch in the system. Honestly, it's all the components working together, and every institution has their own role to play and their own responsibility and their own accountability. Here at the juvenile court system, when children come in, just like adults, they are presumed innocent until they're adjudicated delinquent. Just like as an adult, you're supposed to be presumed innocent until you're found guilty by your peers. In the juvenile system, they just are found that by a judge. When they have charges, they come through our system. The judges and the magistrate do a thorough evaluation to determine what's going on. Until a child is adjudicated to be delinquent, they are presumed to be innocent. And services are in place, systems are in place, and there are allegations. And so we have to act accordingly. Because what you don't want is us just locking up kids and just throwing a wide net and casting a wide net and just locking kids up and keeping them in there, because we know what a detriment is that is to the psyche of young adults. So in situations like that, it's very unfortunate. But you have to let the system play out. You have to give persons their day in court. The prosecutor has to prove their case. The kids have to be adjudicated, and then they have to be sentenced or committed to different services, directions of youth services, or not, and let home. So a lot of times people in the media and in the community get frustrated saying, why are you letting all these kids out? But they only hear part of it. And there's a whole system in place, and you got to give kids their procedural rights and their procedural due process before you can lock them up or send them away in a direct youth facility or bind them over as an adult. There's a system that has to take place, just like an adult system, that gives people their procedural due process, and everything has to play itself out.
Okay.
layman terms.
So so with you being a judge, so
Mm-hmm.
say a young person, a parent is having problems with their child, and like they don't know. I get it all the time. Like, how to help the young kid that is having problems, because they don't want their child to meet you. Although you're
Right.
beautiful and you're a wonderful person, they don't want their kid to meet you.
Mm-hmm.
And like, and they're always asking, like, what are we supposed to do with these kids? But not just the parents, but the community is like, where are the parents, and how do we help these kids, especially if they're getting out. Like, we don't know what to do. Like,
And it's a kind of a tough question. It's part of it is sad because again, it takes a village to raise a child, and when children are not successful, we have failed them as a society because we're the gatekeepers, we're the adults, we're the authorities, we're the institutions that are supposed to help kids make it to be successful adults. And we all have to work collaboratively to make sure that systems are in place, that centers are in place, that resources are in place, that referrals are made to the proper people, that children are fed, that they're going to school. It's a lot of problems, I think, that just perpetuate this cycle. And just like the uptick in juvenile delinquency right now, I think a lot of it may be because of COVID. Unfortunately, we had a crisis, a pandemic that went on for over a year, and children have not been in school. They're not supervised. And we all know idle time is the devil's workshop. You got kids sitting at, and I found out from a reliable source in the education system that 10,000 kids did not ever enroll or sign up for their online school. That's a problem.
is that for Columbus Public?
Yeah. So they did never even checked in one time on their online classes. That's 10,000 kids. They have no education, have not been educated for a year. And then, you think about the problem with poverty, you got to make sure they got the MacBooks. You got to make sure that they got the proper internet connection. You got to make sure they're being fed. You got to make sure they're doing their homework. You got to make sure they're paying attention and logging in. There's a lot of factors into that. And we expect kids to do that, but they can't. I mean, that's why you have adults in there to make sure they have a regimented plan and they're doing what they're supposed to do. So what I can say to our community is, rather to be a complainer or a source of contention or pointing a finger, do what God called you to do to help make this society better. Make the referrals, be the mentor, be the neighborhood grandmother that people like to come to feel like they're a shelter, be the safe place for a kid. Be a janitor at the school and talk to the kids and identify with kids, because a lot of them, they want family. Kids want discipline. That's how we're made, and we need it. And a lot of times, this criminal behavior or alleged criminal behavior, not criminal, I'm sorry, delinquent behavior and frolicking, is because they want some institution of family. Most of the gang initiations is because they want some sense of family and they want someone to care. And until you show them how much you care, they don't care how much you know. And a lot of times I think kids look at the system as totally against them. And we need to be solution oriented and not so much as always pointing a finger and saying these bad kids, those bad kids, and try to come up with a solution as a society, or we're going to be doomed because it's never going to stop. Children are born, children are going to grow up. All the ills of society are going to be available to them. So we have to start making programming available, resources available, community houses available, safe houses, recreation centers. I remember when I was a kid, there was recreation centers. Kids had all summer long to go to recreation centers.
Mm-hmm.
And when parents had to work, they had crafts, they had guidance, they had activities, they had lunches, they had games. It was like a latchkey program over the summer. We had access to swimming pools. You can go swimming all summer. There was always something for us to do to keep us in there, involved and engaged. Mm-hmm. And there was always somebody in our community that cared enough to reach out to kids, to talk to kids, to try to keep them on the straight and narrow. And they had a lot of respect, and they didn't do anything to those people. Even now, where I live at now, the kids love me. They come to me, Miss Monica, They know, I'll give them candy. I said, I better not see one Tootsie Roll paper on this street, and y'all pick up your pop cans. I don't
That's
have,
right.
and they know they're very respectful, they're very mannerable, but they know they can come here. This is a safe place. So we have to start getting back to the basics. I get back to the basics. Just being there for people, being there for kids, loving them unconditionally, trying to give them the discipline and the love and the education they need and the structure that they need, and help divert them away from a bad path.
Like I was telling you earlier that, as a child, I was the first to go to college in my family. I went to Ohio State University. I graduated from O State. I'm a Buckeye. Yay.
Yay!
Um, and I wasn't raised around doctors and lawyers and judges and police. Well, what? Let me take that back. Because my best friend's mom she's a Black police officer. So I grew up, my second mom was a police officer. So I was around a police officer. But as far as like judges and lawyers and doctors and, different people like that, I didn't have access to them. And I know a lot of the different things that's going on right now with these young folks is that I feel like they're getting bad messages from the music, from their peers, from the internet, um from different things like that. Like how can we what's the word I'm looking for? That's fine. Okay. How do we introduce the children to things other than other careers other than like rapping and singing and dancing and sports, and how do we introduce them to different fields and things?
Through exposure and connections. And that's why I told you, whatever I can do in the community to educate them, because a lot of times I was like you. I was the first person in my family to graduate from college. My family was intimidated with that system, and I didn't have a host of role models. I mean, I had a wonderful group of people, but when I say judges, attorneys, doctors, that those weren't in my immediate circle, and it was exposure. People need to take a child and develop them and expose them to different avenues and different accesses and different things, and just making ourselves available so kids can see I can be that. As Black people, we haven't seen that. And this is just now starting to come out where we're able to see movies that reflect us in a positive light,
Yes,
plays
yes.
that look like us, um, clothes that are ethnic, for us. And so kids can see, because when I grew up, I mean, every Black show that I watched was negative, even though I thought it was positive, Good Time. It's
Mm-hmm.
empty nest. The dad was never working, and the family was on welfare. They lived in the projects. You know, everybody always met the stereotypical role. And now we're starting to see cases and see shows of substance, and we're starting to see the Ava DuVernays and see people who can produce and direct the Spike Lees, and we're starting to see people that look like us, of our ancestry, that are doing phenomenal things. So I think the more exposure that kids have, and the more they're able to touch those in those neighborhoods, to say it's not just television. We got Black judges here in Franklin County that care about us. We got Black doctors. Dr. Roberts is a Black African American woman, and she's the commissioner of the health department. Us as leaders being accessible so kids can see there's people that look like me, that talk like me, that think like me, that have achieved success or significance,
Yes,
and I can do
yes,
the same thing. It's just making ourselves, and that's what I try to do as a leader, humanize myself as a judge. I
yes.
have a role, I have a role, and I have respect, but I want people to know the human part, that I am a person, I'm a human being, I'm not perfect. I'm here. God put me on this path and this purpose, and I really believe I'm supposed to be here, but it's not for me. It's for the next generation, and it's for someone else to step up on my shoulder, and some little Black girl can say, not only do I want to be a judge, I want to be a vice president. I want to be the president. That they start shooting for things to achieve and accomplish things that we never in our wildest dreams that we thought we can be. That we can be our ancestors' wildest dreams. That Martin Luther King, Malcolm X's, the Marcus Garvey, they dreamed this stuff for us, and they fought for us to be at the table. So just being available and being accessible and exposing kids to the positiveness of being Black in heaven and be proud. I can talk all day about this stuff, but I think a lot of the problems still stem from the effects of slavery and racism. And I know people don't like to say it. They say you talk about that all the time, but it is in every thread of my being.
Yeah.
As a Black woman, I am always second guessed. I am always questioned, and I always have to prove myself. And I always have to prove that I'm just as smart, just as competent, just as capable. We don't get the privileges of just existing. We always have that barrier of racism that affects how people perceive us, how our perception is of ourselves and our society. You know, it's such a deep problem, and it all stems to racism and poverty. If you're a Black girl and you never see any positive Black woman, you never think a Black woman is beautiful, and all you see is long silky hair and very, very light, and small lips, small features, and all they ever tell you is that you're ugly, you'll never be anything, you guys are those are negative messages. And that kid grows up to have no self-esteem, no self-worth. And that's what we're dealing with a lot of our juveniles. I mean, they're saying they're criminals and can't be rehabilitated, but they're just masking what they see as an adult. We become violent as a society. And a lot of times we've told these kids, you'll amount to nothing, you'll be nothing. They don't go to school, they don't get reaffirmed, they don't get any positive accolades, they don't get any positive messaging. And they have no self-worth, they have no value of their life, so they're not going to value anybody else's life, and they have no sense of purpose, and they have hopelessness. So you have all that, and then they're children, and that's going to cause a problem when they have no value and no worth, and you're hopeless. You don't take the means and method that all the rest of us will to deal with issues. You're going to resort to negative behavior. So as a society, and it's Black people and it's white people who are allies with us and understand that this is a struggle and this is life and this is ingrained in our society and is a part of our DNA, that Blacks have never been considered equal. And we have to continue to have voting rights reenacted, re-legislated. I mean, still we're waiting on it to be signed. And the Emmett Till anti-lynching law still hasn't been passed. So we're still fighting to be treated like human beings. And you're telling these kids, you're sending them mixed messages. And to be poor and Black, I'm sure it's got to be a horrible experience to be poor and Black and not educated and not have any hope that you're going to be able to engage in what our society believes is success: a job, a house, a car, and a family. The hierarchy of needs not even got them to that level. They got to have their basic needs met before we even expect them to act like responsible kids and be accountable and be respectful and be loving and be kind. We got to emulate that stuff, and we got to develop them in it before they come to that point that they're hardened and you're not able to penetrate and touch them. Just as a judge, every one of my juveniles that come in there, I speak to them. Everyone that comes in, before they come in my courtroom, I go back to that holding cell and say, hey, how are you doing? What's going on? Are you okay? Have you been doing what they told you to do? Even when my cases are continued, a lot of times, I go and just acknowledge that I understand that you're here and I see your presence. When cases conclude, sometimes parents haven't sent their children. I let the parents hug their children and say goodbye.
Aww.
I want them to know that I care about them, and every decision that we make is for their best interest and for their good. That I'm not going to treat them like an animal. I know that they're there, and I know that they matter. And I try to have come to Jesus meetings when I can. It moves me, and that's what I want to do, and that's what I want to spread to this society, that we care, and I care about your kids, and I want nothing but the best for these juveniles.